Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live here. This is Gio, Smart Home Makers. Today, we're going to be talking about automations. So we're going to talk about NodeRed automations and Home Assistant automations. Today, to join me, I have a special guest. He has his own channel. His name is Will, and you'll find him at Will Surridge Tech. We're going to bring him on immediately. But in the meantime, we'll give it a couple of minutes for people to join. So just to welcome everyone, let me know where you're actually watching this from. We're broadcasting from the UK, so let us know. And also, we're going to have a interesting Q&A, but just feel free to pop in questions at any time, mainly around automations, but any sort of smart home question is welcome. So I'm going to bring in Will now. He's in the backstage. He's ready to go. So I'm going to add you in, Will.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Will.
Yeah, I'm Will. I have my own channel, Will Surridge Tech, and I also kind of focus on home automation, looking at Home Assistant specifically, various kind of smart products and projects that I can do around them.
Good stuff. So we're just going to maybe touch on our backstories a little bit, and it'll be cool to hear your backstory. How did you get into smart tech and Home Assistant in general?
So, like most people, my entry to smart tech was a Black Friday deal. I got some Philips Hue light bulbs and an Echo Dot back in the day, Generation 2. And that was great. I was at uni at the time, so I was kind of all I could do, a couple of light bulbs and a speaker. But I really enjoyed it. And then when I graduated, I ended up in a house and could do a lot more. So the journey kind of went from there, really. I added a few more bits of kit, but then realized that I had all this stuff and I had hundreds of apps, and none of my kit was smart. It was just connected. And that's where Home Assistant came along. After a lot of research and Googling, I discovered Home Assistant and set to work. And that was May last year. So I was using it for about a year before I started my YouTube channel. And then, I decided that I knew enough about Home Assistant that I'd like to kind of give back to the Home Assistant community. I'd obviously watched a lot of videos to get me started. And I knew that there was a lot of work out there being done by the developers and the community around Home Assistant. So I thought I'd try and contribute in my own way. And that involved making tutorial videos for you guys.
That's fantastic. So my backstory, my first sort of dipped my toes in 2016. And I bought the SmartThings Hub, Samsung SmartThings Hub. So it was like a Christmas gift. It was one of the starter kits. I don't know if you remember, Will, the one with the socket, the motion sensor, the hub. So I got into that, and my hope was that with time, we would actually get better and better and have more products, and be able to interconnect. Then I actually found out that they weren't adding in all those products in. And they added a few over the years, but it wasn't getting there. So then I looked into something new, and I found Home Assistant, and I liked the sort of open source concept. I'm a developer myself. I'm a data engineer, so I don't do actual coding in that sense, but do appreciate it. And I thought, well, let me jump in. So me being a novice at Home Assistant, you Google the forums, Reddit, Facebook groups, all the documentation. You're trying to piece things together. And what I found was that not everything is straightforward to do. Not everything is easy to understand. And it takes a while. And then there was the odd time when I got it all working and it all crashed. I lost it all. And then I had to redo it again. But then I couldn't remember how I did it initially. It was quite frustrating. I was starting to having notes of what I did. And then eventually I said, you know what, I need to document this better, whatever I'm doing to set it up. And then, the idea came is, well, if I'm documenting it, then why not just, record it? And then why not record it? Why not share it? Similar like what you were saying, Will, why not share it with other people? And then share the love, share the passion for smart home tech. A lot of people that know me just think like we're like some geeks. Also, you have to get to the point where your smart home is mature enough that your family, if you live with someone else, sort of accepts it. Gets to the point where, you know, before it's just a light bulb turning on and off from your phone, and it starts getting more useful. So it sort of matures. I've still got a long way to go. And today, actually, it's one of the reasons, because I started looking at NodeRed, and I really want to get Will's opinion on that, and everyone else's opinion, really. So I would like to know if you want to let us know, actually, where do you do your automation? So either in a Home Assistant, NodeRed, both, hybrid, none, whatever. It would be cool to actually find out, you know, where you do your own automations. So let us know, because that would be quite interesting. I don't know how many I've seen in the Facebook group. There's quite a few people like only Home Assistant, don't want to touch NodeRed. A few people love NodeRed, think that everyone should be using it, and then there's the hybrid. You know, so I think we'll talk through it ourselves, and we'll share our own opinions when we get there. So let me know, Will, if you want to add anything else.
No, I think that's all good. Yeah. There are obviously so many ways. That's kind of the beauty of Home Assistant, is there are so many ways of doing the same thing, so many ways of setting it up, so many ways of visualizing your entities, your data, and that's why Home Assistant is great, because it isn't an out of the box solution ready made. It's a thing where you make it for yourself, and you make it for whatever works for you. And as with automations, obviously there is Home Assistant. There's both the YAML editing in Home Assistant, or the UI editing in Home Assistant, or you've got the option of using NodeRed, which is what I use predominantly. In fact, I use it entirely for my automations. Everything goes through NodeRed, just because I find it easier for me to interface with. I don't know. Do you want to go through how to use Home Assistant automations, and then we'll move on to NodeRed, and then we can kind of discuss and compare?
Go ahead, Will. Go ahead. Feel free to share your screen, get yourself set up. All good. Just get a check in the comment section. We're all fine. And yeah, just let me know when you're ready. Share your screen. I'll put on the live.
Yeah, so I'm all good.
Right.
So a little precursor. I've actually reinstalled my Home Assistant yesterday. I have recently moved house, and I found that I just had all sorts of things in the wrong place. I had all sorts of things that I'd tested that I wasn't using anymore, all sorts of devices with the wrong names. So I thought I'd just start again. And that enables me to also kind of remember how the setup process goes. And I know a lot has changed since I initially installed it back last year. So it allowed me some time to kind of go through everything again, work out the new way of doing things. And I'm going to look into using the UI Lovelace editor and the UI integrations a lot more going forward. So bear with me, because I've got a few entities in here, but I definitely don't have them all. And I've copied all my flows over from NodeRed, but they don't work because obviously all the entities have changed. So I'll just quickly walk through kind of NodeRed and how it works and what it does. And then we can have a look at Home Assistant, and then we can kind of compare and contrast and get your opinions on it. So NodeRed has a lot of nodes, which is all these things on the right, and they do various different things. There are some Home Assistant specific nodes, or you can get some NodeRed specific nodes, which are kind of templates or delays, the kind of more functional based nodes. And then you can also integrate different nodes from different providers. So I've got Evo Home, I've got Hue, Sonos, that kind of thing. And that unlocks extra features in the API that might not necessarily be integrated in the Home Assistant integration, but you could potentially unlock within NodeRed itself. So then you obviously have this workboard. You can have a selection of kind of pages to do various things, and you just kind of create a flow. So each flow needs a trigger. So for this flow, it's triggered by a timestamp, which is just an inject node. So I can just click here and that flow will start. And then you just kind of link on sequentially what you want to happen. So if we find one that I've actually got working, oh dear, we can kind of run through it. Okay, so this is a sleep scene. So I trigger this scene using an input Boolean in Home Assistant. When that input Boolean goes on, it then moves on, and after 15 minutes, it'll turn off, so it's ready for the next day. And then we've got various things happening. We've got a few Sonos players stopping, a sleep playlist playing in the bedroom, some lights turning off, delays, We then have a question mark over guests. If I've got guest mode on in Home Assistant, then it won't turn the guest lights off. But if I don't, then those lights will turn off automatically. And then some heating. So this is kind of a very simple, it's almost more of a scene than an automation, because it happens on a manual trigger. But that's one I've got here. And I've got a few more scenes that I went through actually in my scenes video. What do we have that's more of an automation? Oh, very simple one. Kitchen counter lights going on overnight. So I'm using a light scheduler node, which you can see has an interface that you can kind of turn it on and off given times of the day. So between 10 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning, it will trigger this node. And then this node will turn on and it will just switch based whether it's on or off. If it's on, it turns the lights on. If it's off, it turns the lights off. It's very simple. And that's kind of the beauty of NodeRed, is the simple ones are very simple, but you can also go a lot more complicated with it. I have a few, they aren't particularly complicated. I've got kind of a heating boost automation, which I've got a video on going into the details, but you can select the room, the delay of it, and you can and you trigger it, and then it will split it off and control the Evo Home sensors to turn it on and off. So I suppose
Will, I have a question, Will. Sorry if I interrupt you. Just to get an understanding, how long does it take you to do one of these, for example, like the heating one? How long from start to finish?
So the heating one was quite a complicated one because I was merging the kind of three settings that I wanted. I had to merge them together to then go through the flow, because you can't, because the way a flow works is you kind of go from start to finish down this signal path. And so you've got to merge it. You can't put multiple things into a switch, for example. So there are a few kind of nuances with NodeRed that take time.
Right.
But things like this outdoor heater shutoff was very simple. Mm-hmm. So this one, when I turn the heater on, then I delay an hour and then I turn it off. That means I'm not leaving my heater on outside when I'm not out there. It's just kind of a fail-safe. Like if you go to a pub, you have to press the button every hour or it turns off. And that was very simple. And I have it, so it checks the guest mode. And if guest mode is on, then it'll delay 3 hours rather than 1 hour. Just because if I've got guests, then I'll probably be outside longer with them talking. And
right.
that node took a couple of minutes to make, because it's a very simple start to finish. You just drag in your event state node, which triggers it. You've got a current state node, which gets the state of something else. And then you finally got a cool service node, which does something at the other end. And then a couple of nodes in between. So it depends how complicated your flow is going to be, or your automation. But they are very simple if you want a simple one.
Amazing. Maybe we should take a few questions. We've got a few questions already in, Will. Yeah, so take a few. Well, first of all, hi to we've got Nuno or Orvid, Mankas, Tibor, Bradley, Gavin, Ivan, Paul, so Charlie. Thank you for all joining all over the world. That's amazing. So a few things around here. Mainly a lot of so we got question. We got I think Gavin more of a statement. All my stuff is through NodeRed. I thought it was easy to see it all mapped out with their nodes. When I built automated blinds, all programmed in NodeRed. So we got Gavin is more for a NodeRed guy. Let's see if we've got more of a Home Assistant guy. Hi Arnold from Dubai, sunny Dubai. Oh, nice. Cool. You can put multiple things into a switch. Gavin's saying you can put multiple things into a switch if you program it to flick the switch twice or 3 times. So I think that's a hint.
It sounds like a hint. I'm not entirely sure how to do that.
Which, yeah, it's all a learning curve, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bradley's got a question. Sorry, Bradley, missed that. So, evening chaps, do either of you prioritize automations without additional bridges to ensure compatibility with Home Assistant and ZoneRed? Like, for example, locks, HUA bridge, and all that other stuff.
Personally, I don't prioritize anything. I've got various devices that need a bridge. I've got a few Zigbee things, as you might have seen in my recent video. I've got a few Hue. Oh, most of my lights are Hue, so they obviously all need a bridge. And then I've got various Wi-Fi devices as well. So I wouldn't say I prioritize anything. If I've got a device that runs on a certain protocol and I want an automation based on it, then I'll make the automation based on it. I don't think there's any prioritization at all. And I think compatibility with Home Assistant is just so big at the moment anyway. I won't generally buy something that unless it is compatible with Home Assistant in some way or another. So, and if it's compatible with Home Assistant, it flows through into NodeRed very easily. So yeah, hope that answers that one.
Cool. Yeah, from my point of view, mine was actually a bit of a mess, and I'm trying to clean it up. I might make a video actually about me transitioning, but I started with all my automation in SmartThings and moving to Home Assistant, but I still got some with the Philips Hue app, because I've got the bridge with all the bulbs, and I've got those motion sensors, and the actual triggering of the lights happens within Philips. Which is a good and a bad thing sometimes, because I play around a lot with Home Assistant, as you might imagine. So I like shut it off, reboot it constantly. If we were to constantly reboot your Home Assistant, it will go down, and then people, when they walk, they expect the light to come on, and it's not going to work, right? And it's just going to cause like a disruption. And I think when you get to a point where your smart home, when sort of the functionality is not there and people miss it, I think you're sort of on the right track, because that means that it's not just a game anymore. People are actually relying on it. People are going to say, oh, how come this smart plug didn't turn on? Whatever happened. So maybe for us, it's a bit more because we were experimenting a lot all the time. I would like to have maybe two versions, one running solid, and then some other version I can sort of do all my videos and testing on.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking into that idea at some point. Because the way I see it, yeah, I've got one that I'm kind of updating, but I always want one that's always on. So if I could have a setup of two, and I haven't, to be honest, I haven't looked into it, so I've no clue how easy it would be. But if I could have a setup of two, where I've got one that's kind of an editing one and one that's live, and then once after a week of tinkering, I can transfer my editing one over to the live one, and then that's updated, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how well that would work if you've got multiple automations happening or being triggered by two separate controllers, effectively. I wonder if it might go a bit.
I think you have the situation. I don't know if you know about The Simpsons. There was that time they had that smart home. I don't know if anyone follows The Simpsons. And when it's the sort of home, it's one of the Halloween editions that sort of the home sort of takes over. You don't know what's happening. Things will start blinking. I guess if you have too many automation systems. Actually, I use HomeKit a lot because I'm an iOS person. So I've got iOS devices, and sometimes I just play around with HomeKit. And if I forget the automation on, I'm like, oh, how come this is happening? Cool. So guys, keep the questions coming in. We're gonna carry on now, and then we'll pick up some more questions later.
Well, I think I mean I'm happy with, unless anyone's got any questions specifically about NodeRed. I've gone through everything that's kind of obvious to that. Gia, do you want to take over and kind of walk through your automations in Home Assistant, and we can compare the two?
Yeah, sure. Just one thing before we do that, my question I would have for you, Will, is where's the best place to actually learn NodeRed? How do you approach it? Let's say someone's never used it before. How do they go about actually learning this?
I think it's not about, well, there's a combination of things. Personally, the easiest way to get something from my head onto NodeRed is to write it down. So I want to say, for example, this is obviously a very simple one, but the outdoor heater that I've already talked about, I want to say that if I turn this heater on, then I want to check guest mode. If guest mode is on, then I want to do this. If guest mode is off, then I want to do this. And so by having kind of creating a flowchart on paper, because obviously these are effectively flowcharts. If you just create a flowchart of what you want your automation to be on paper, and then you kind of look at each item in your flowchart and you swap it out for a node. So the first item would be when the heater is turned on. So what I need is an event state node, which checks for the heater to be on. So and then you just kind of swap it out, and then you link them together. And there are obviously going to be things that are more complicated, things that you don't quite understand, things that might not work instantly with the built-in NodeRed node. And kind of that's another point, I suppose. You've got a way that you can install hundreds of different types of palettes of nodes. So like the Evo Home one, you have to install that separately. It's effectively an add-on.
Right. So like custom components, similar
a bit like a custom
right?
component. So yeah, Sonos, Hue, they're all kind of, you have to add on separately. And there are some great ones in there. Some like I used in here somewhere. Yeah, so this start time, end time control node thing basically triggers something whether if it's within a certain time or not within a certain time. And that sort of thing you've just got to Google, and you've got to work out how many different ways you can phrase the same question in Google until you get the answer. And there are loads of people out there. Yeah, and there are loads of people out there who will have used different nodes. Like this node is part of I believe it's part of the Sun time palette. I'm not sure I'll be able to find it now. And I wouldn't have thought of using that sort of palette to set a start and end time for something. So yeah, I went out there, I found someone online. Actually, I think they emailed me and told me this node existed. So I was like, okay, great, I'll use that. So there are lots of ways of doing things, and there are lots of different kind of things you can do. And there are also obviously function nodes which do various different things. If you're comfortable writing this sort of code to get stuff to happen easily, obviously it gets more complicated when you start doing that. And there are generally nodes or palettes out there to avoid doing that. But
right.
Yeah, so go back to your question. The easiest thing to do is to write down what you want to happen, turn each point in your flow into a node, and then work out whether those nodes exist.
Right. Cool. I think that all makes sense. I think it's good to have an understanding, a graphical way of seeing what's going on with your automations. But I've got more questions, but let's keep that for later for NodeRed. Let's now move on to Home Assistant. Have a look at automations in Home Assistant. Is that fine for you, Will?
Yeah, cool.
And feel free still to put questions down. We'll pick them up afterwards. And if you haven't already, check out Will's channel and subscribe to that, because he's got a lot of good content coming up. Also, like this stream if you're enjoying it. And let's get on with my screen share. So I should have it all ready. I'm going to add it to the stream. And right, so that's that. So I'm showing you now at the moment GitHub. So for who doesn't know, if you don't know what GitHub is, basically it's a source code repository. And basically it's where you can store code. You can do many things with it. Version control is one of the reasons you would do this. So you can see the different iterations. So every time you commit, you can see different versions of your smart home. But also you can share your code with other people and you can collaborate. So perhaps it is easier to collaborate with files than maybe perhaps on NodeRed, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. This is sort of my point of view of how I see it So that's I'll show you how I got it structured and my actual plan of what to do in the future. So I started very simply. I started with the automations.yaml file, and I created my first one. I created a few, as you can see, scrolling down. Few of these automations. Some of them were just to test out things. Some of them are not even really useful. They're just for me to understand, to learn. And then after a while, I was getting frustrated. I was getting confused because I want to change this this one here around the fridge is too warm message, and I was like, well, how do I get to it? And I don't really understand. It's not spaced properly. So I had this problem a bit at the beginning, right? So this is where I sort of started, and where I'm going now is I've actually moved towards automations. And there was a great live stream from Dr. Z's and I think Frank, and they actually go through in detail of how you can split your YAMLs. And I thought that was a really good video to watch. Not sure if it's got the attention that it deserves, but I watched that video and I actually understood what you can do and how you can split out in folders. So I followed their approach and I created an automations folder. And within the automations folder, I started creating these folders, right? And these folders are just for me, just to group automations together so I can sort of know where things are. So I have one, for example, for announcements. I had one from one of my Halloween short videos I did. A few things here and there, lights, robo vacuum. At the moment, they are a bit all over the place. So I think there are different ways you can structure your folders. You can either structure the folders by room. So you can have upstairs, downstairs, kitchen, whatever. But then if you have automations that span across multiple rooms, that doesn't make sense, right? So I thought, right, maybe I'll do a device type. So like lights motions, notification motion, sort of notification automations, structure it that way. But then I thought, well, sometimes I want to do both together, right? So I'm not convinced what is the best way of the folder structure. So I'm not too sure where. But basically, how it works, you within the folders, you can have different files. And the way I've set it up is that each YAML file has its own automation. So I've set it in a way that there's only one per file. So it's easier for me to read. It's also easier for me to do source control on it, because what I can do is I can check in GitHub. You can create branches. So branches are for, like, for example, you're working on a project. So I'm working on a video, for example, to do maybe a smart plug on my Christmas tree, right? So I want to create automation for that. But in the meantime, I'm working on something else. So I might create two branches. So I'm basically separating the GitHub repository out. And then I can make changes here, commit them, make changes over there. And then I can then switch the branches around in Home Assistant. I'll show you how you can do that. So you can then have different sets of automations. Hypothetically, I haven't set this up yet, but whatever we were talking about, Will, earlier, if you have multiple versions of Home Assistant running, you have a development version and you have a production version, you should be able to deploy the scripts. So you should be able to have a script that zips up your configurations, automations, and then moves it to the other server and basically unzips it. So you need to do that to then, once you're happy with the automations, then you want to push it into your main Home Assistant, let's say. So that's another use case of this. And the way I do it is, I think there's a lot of, my understanding that there isn't a specific order. You can put these in any order you want. So you can put conditions after actions or actions before condition. But the tricky one is to indent it properly. So you can use external tools. I use Atom, but you can use Visual Studio Code to actually see the right spacing to get it right. Because obviously, if you do it within the file editor, which I'll show you, you have that green tick, and green tick will say, yeah, it's right or not right. For me, it's really important to have a good alias. I mean, this is the key one. The alias is the sort of your name, and then that's what you'll see in the automation itself. And with a lot of these, well, what I find is I write the automation the first time, and then I leave it a week, and then something happens that I didn't expect it to happen. And then I think, you know what, I need to put a condition on that. I need to go back to automation. I need to iterate on it, improve it, and slightly change it, right? So that's something that happens to me. So I'll show you how you can get a similar structure. It's very simple. So if you go to your configuration.yaml file, and the only thing you need to add is this line here. So line 13, basically it just says include the directory. So we include all the files under, and then whatever the name of the folder. So my example, automations. So then this will basically is all what you need. I've still got this one because the reason for this is for retrocompatibility with the existing setup. So you don't need to move all of your automations out. You can just take one out of the main file, put it in a separate file, reload everything, test it out, and you can just do bit by bit. You don't have to move all of your 100 automations in one go. Some might make it easier for you to, for you to organize your automations. Right, so that is really for this one, and I'll show you in Home Assistant itself. So you can see here, I've got a thing called branch here, and if you click on the branch, you'll see, so master is basically your production system. So alarm system is the branch name, so that's like your project. So this is what you're working on. So you're working on alarm system. When you're finished with working with alarm system, you then do a merge, and then you would merge it into master. And if you're interested in learning a bit more about Git, I might do a separate video about how to use GitHub. I actually use it in my day job, so sort of more familiar with it than normal. That is also one of the reasons why I do my automations. I write my automations. I don't use the UI, which I think Will, you're going to show us later on how to use home automation UIs. Yeah, I think he's nodding. So he'll show us.
We'll have a look at that.
He'll show us how to do them in the UI, which we recommend for people just starting out. Just get going with the UI first, because anyway, if you're doing it in the UI, it's going to write it into the file anyway, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then once you've got in the file, then you see how it is created, and then you can change it in the file or in the UI again, right? So you got the two options. So that's it really, and your reload will still work. So that's some. I think that was like a myth that your reload doesn't work anymore, but it sort of does. It does work even if you split up in this way. There are a lot of things you can do, but I also find some limitations, to be honest. For example, like global variables, I find that concept really useful. I can't, when an automation needs to call another automation and pass over a variable, I find that a bit difficult to achieve with automations with YAML. But it's a quite powerful platform, and this is the green tick that I was talking to you about. So really, that's me for automations in YAML, giving you a bit of an overview. I'm happy now if we should maybe stop briefly, take some questions before we move on to the UI part. Is that fine, Will, with you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Right, so what I'll do is I'll remove this. Okay, so let's go. And for some reason, these comments are not appearing in the software that I'm using, which is StreamYard. But that's why I need to go. We need to go in the actual YouTube studio to actually see the comments. So let me scroll back up. Let's see if we can. If we got some. Right, so we've got a question from Manx about Tasmota devices. Have you got Tasmota devices, Will?
I've got Tasmota, I'm afraid, is my Zigbee bridge. I was more of a ESP home kind of guy than a Tasmota kind of guy. But I see your question. I think so. So he's asking if there's any benefit of using the Tasmota integration in Home Assistant or just going straight into NodeRed. I would strongly recommend putting everything into Home Assistant and then pulling it out into NodeRed, because once it's in Home Assistant, you can then do whatever in Home Assistant with it, and NodeRed can kind of affect that. Whereas if you integrate it into NodeRed, then it's locked there and you can't have it on your Home Assistant dashboard, for example. So definitely put it into Home Assistant and then use NodeRed to trigger that, because that gives you much more control and flexibility over it.
Cool. We got next point by Omar. He's saying HA is there to negate the need for prioritizing anything or buying into an ecosystem. Very much putting control back into your own hands. So my opinion, I agree with you 100%. That is the reason why we go through the effort of actually setting up Home Assistant versus using something like HomeKit or something already out of the box. I would say on the downside on that, you've got so many options, you don't know which one to set up. So I'm looking at, for example, smart plugs, and there's like 3 or 4, 5, and I'm not sure which one to pick. I might make a video of them. I might try to get them all and see which one works better. But you need to be obviously aware of the different types of integrations, how they integrate. Some of them are actually custom, thanks to the Home Assistant community store. So there's a lot of stuff that gets integrated that way. Oh, but good point. Good point. Will, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Oyvind. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Yes, NodeRed is a graphical user interface. It does make things a lot easier to kind of visualize and see, especially for the simple things. But you quickly run into some complex templating JSON scripting. Yeah, I mean, if you're doing simple things, then it does stay simple. If you want to start doing very complicated things, then you do end up with JSON and scripting, and it does get complicated. But I think it's no more complicated than doing the same thing in Home Assistant through the YAML or through the user interface. But in NodeRed, you can actually see it happening, and you've got debug nodes, so you know where things are going wrong or what you need to change with that. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so Steve, hi Steve. Steve says, I migrated all my devices from SmartThings to Home Assistant. Yeah, I think we're all we'll agree that is a good move here. Any tips on improving communication speed locally? So, oh man, this is a bit of a big question to answer on the spot, but I think you've got the different protocols. You've got some of them are Wi-Fi devices. You've got your Z-Wave, Zigbee. I think they're the 3 main protocols. Some are also Bluetooth. So what I would say is, if you're particularly struggling with one device, try and get into the understanding why. I would always start with Wi-Fi. I think that's what is going to give you the biggest benefit in your home. Just try to get good Wi-Fi on all of your devices will make things a lot better. Even if you haven't got Wi-Fi smart gadgets, I would always start with your home network first. So getting that secure, having a good firewall, having good Wi-Fi, and then moving things along that way. It also will depend on how your home set up.
Yeah, kind of following on from that, your Wi-Fi network is key. Most things you'll be doing will be on Wi-Fi, I imagine. So just make sure you've got good coverage. But the other thing actually is key is the integration type. So there are 5 different types of integration in Home Assistant, and it kind of depends on it affects how Home Assistant sees your device or the information from your device. But broadly speaking, there's a local integration or there's a cloud integration. So things like the Evo Home is a cloud integration. That means if I want to control my heating, then Home Assistant has to tell the Evo Home cloud what I've set it to, which then comes back down to tell my thermostat to go up, for example. Whereas Hue is local, which means if I tell Home Assistant to turn my Hue light on, then it just goes straight from my Home Assistant Pi to my Hue fridge and out to the bulbs. So reducing that step of cloud does speed up the process a lot, because you're not relying on other people's servers. You're not relying on internet speed. You're just on the network.
Fantastic. I think we got a fan here, Will Arnaud, saying you sorted out his air conditioning system in his villa. Well, I think we're all a bit jealous. It's quite cold where I am in the UK. I don't know, probably it's cold where you are, Will, right?
Yeah, no, very cold here too.
Very jealous for that aircon system. Okay, let's see if we can pick up a next one.
So we've got a lot of people talking about Home Assistant versus NodeRed. I would recommend just going with NodeRed. You just jump in. It will take a little bit of time to understand what's going on, but as Omar says, it does just click. And once it's clicked, you're very happy, and you can do so much more with it. You can start thinking in flows rather than in kind of script, and it just kind of comes to you, and you follow the signal path.
So in terms of debugging, right, how easy is it to debug so if something goes wrong?
So it's very easy. There is a debug node, and you just add that into your signal path wherever you want, and you can get it to do various different things. You can either get it to look at a specific message, or you can just get it to look at the complete message output or object. And if you set it to the complete message object, then you trigger the flow, and you can see from your debug node the whole message string. So which part of the string is kind of what the message parameters are, what the values of those parameters are. And that's a really useful way of working out where things are getting stuck, where things are getting lost. You might see that before a certain node, you've got a debug that has exactly the right parameters, but after that node, suddenly all those parameters have disappeared, which is why it's not then continuing and doing what you're expecting it to. So definitely make use of those debug nodes, work out how they work, and just start getting used to reading what it says and working out what's gone wrong with it from there.
Fantastic, fantastic. I had to switch camera. I don't know what happened, but I think we got a backup camera, so it's all good. Let's see the next one.
I think that's it with questions for now.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Do you want to run through the UI editing of automations, or do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead, Will, go ahead. I'll see if I can sort this thing out here.
Can you post my screen?
Yeah. There we go.
So this is the UI editor. In the configuration, you click automations. Obviously, I don't have any because I don't use it, but it's kind of it's a different way of doing things, and you can do a bit of kind of human readable language in a way to start an automation. So, for example, if you want the lights to turn on when the sun is set, you could write that in that box there, or I'm just going to click it, and it will kind of interpret what you're saying, and you can select your lights, and you create the automation. And then, it's already filled out the name. It's using the trigger as the sunset, and it's already added some of my lights in here. So it's really quick and easy way of integrating an automation straight away. And there are good ways of doing it. And as Gio said, it does then publish itself to the YAML file, so you can see how it's written out afterwards. So potentially, if you're not comfortable with YAML yet, but you want to go down the YAML route, you can create an automation in this and see how that's gone into YAML, and then you can edit it from there. Or it's worth noting that if you create it in the YAML, then it doesn't appear in the UI editor. So if you want to have the flexibility of both, then create it in the UI editor first. So yeah, it's kind of it's an easier way of doing things in a way. You can add your various different action types from triggers, call services, delays, repeats, that kind of thing. I think again, it needs a bit of getting used to in terms of what you're doing. If you want a call service, then you've obviously got to add the service data, which is exactly the same as if you're doing it in NodeRed. You call service and then you add your service data, whether that's the brightness, the color temperature, that kind of thing. But the kind of initial way you can write a sentence, it kind of pre-builds it for you, is very clever. And it's a nice way of starting it off, especially if you're new to it all. But that's kind of all there is to this editing format. It kind of, you set a trigger, you set a number of triggers, you add your conditions, and you add your actions. It's very similar to the YAML. You just don't have to write any YAML to make it.
Fantastic. I think maybe we should mention also the developer tools. We haven't touched on that really. A lot of Home Assistant people will be quite familiar with it. But I think if someone's sort of coming in from from other platforms and checking this out, then maybe it's just worth talking about that. Yeah,
okay. So the first developer tool is Estates, and that just has a list of all the entities that you have integrated into Home Assistant. So if we just pick one, this light, you can see it's on, that's the state, and then these are all the state attributes. So we can see all of the information about that, and these are all things that you can potentially change with a call service node, or a call service if you're just in Home Assistant. So you've got your brightness, you've got your color in various forms, a friendly name, color effect list, that kind of thing is all there. Or if it's heating, then you've got set points for your schedule. You've got the temperature, you've got the current temperature, the set temperature, what mode it's in, whether it's heat or cool or temporary or permanent, all of that kind of thing is here. So this is a good way of seeing all of the information related to a certain device, so you can then work out what you might want to change. The next one is the service, which is where you can call services. So for example, if you want your light to turn off, you select your entity and you just call the service and that light will turn off. Or you can turn it on and then you can see all of these different things that you can put in there. So if you wanted your light to have a brightness of 255, then you just put that in there and call the service. And so it's a great way of kind of quickly working out what you want to do. And obviously you can do some of this within Lovelace, but if you don't have your Lovelace set up, or you're just trying to do it off the fly or wanting to get an exact setting just from a one call service node, then this is a great place to do it. Next we have templates, which is, templates are quite complicated. I've done a video on them and they're still quite complicated, but it's a way of doing things with things to make other things. It's kind of as simple as it gets. So you can get, this is going to be testing all of my, that's probably going to be wrong. But we can put in theory, information here, and we have failed. Yeah.
Probably state attribute, maybe? Attribute.
Is it? I don't think it was.
No.
Anyway, there is a way to gather information, and then you could do things like add one to it, or whatever you might want to do. If you wanted to get, for example, if you want your alarm to come on 2 hours before your work time is going to start, then you could use this to take 2 hours away from it. Templates are very powerful of getting one thing and turning it into something else.
Yeah,
and last of all, oh, go on.
No. What I would say is always use the documentation when you actually do these. It's always good to have it. One page you're doing it, and then one page of documentation, because I never remember all the syntax. So it's always good to have it.
Yeah, the syntax and this website is hideous, and it doesn't make sense. I think I've done a bit of a.
Omar said state_attr. Thanks, Omar.
I was close. I won't do it now. I'm going to do it now because I've started. Oh, can't spell, eh? There we go. We can see that the temperature of this bedroom is set to 13. I could add 1 to it, and we can see it popped out at 14. So that might be useful in your automations. It might be useful in terms of just displaying stuff. And if we go to the demo template, we can see that they've kind of used a lot of random stuff and ended up with this nice string at the end of it, which you might want to print out in your Lovelace, for example. So it's very powerful, but it's very complicated at the same time. And last of all is events. I don't really know what these are. I've never used them. It looks like you can listen to certain events, which I'm guessing is similar to an event state node in here, where we listen to a certain event for an entity ID. I'm guessing it's a bit like that. But to be honest, I don't really know.
I think that's a great overview. What I would say is that to find out what parameters are optional and which ones are compulsory when you're running your automation. So you'll find that there'll be, some of them will also be similar. So I think you've got the brightness in points, like 0 to 255, but then you've got the brightness in percentage. That confused me because I was like, well, they're conflicting. So you either have one or the other. You can't have both together. And if you do have both, so for example, if you click on fill example data, it's just down there, you see it fills it all in, and you would assume that would work. So if you try call service, you think it would work, but it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't work because you have all of these
We've got 4 different ways of defining, no, 7 different ways of defining color.
Yeah, so it is it's sort of powerful. I mean, you could do what you want, but I think for someone's just starting out, they're going to think, oh, how come this is not working? Because I just used the sample data and it's just not working. So I guess that's one thing can catch people out. I think Arnaud, he's saying in the chat section, he's saying that he used events, especially for Zigbee switches, and it helps for the automations. Oh, cool. So let us know in what ways you think it helps. So it's always good to learn something new.
I'm sure the documentation is very clear. I just have not read it.
That's great. That's great. Cool. So Will, do you want to talk about your future plans with the channel? What are your upcoming videos? Again, upcoming. You can find Will at Will Surridge Tech. You're on YouTube and you're also on Facebook, Instagram.
I'm on Facebook and Instagram, yeah. So hit subscribe, hit like, hit follow, all those things. So I've got a few exciting things coming up. As I said, I've recently just reinstalled Home Assistant. So I'm going to be doing a series of videos on kind of the start to finish of Home Assistant, how you can go from the install, looking at various add-ons you might need, looking at DuckDNS, looking at kind of everything you need to know to get from nothing to kind of a useful place to be. So I'm going to do a series on that. I've also recently unboxed my first 3D printer, which is very exciting. I've had it sitting in a box since August, which I know is sacrilege. But finally, I found some time to unbox it and get it out. So that's very exciting. I've got here my first little dog. Perfect, I know. So I'm sure that will feature in a few videos coming up as well. Beyond that, I don't really know what's going to happen. We just kind of play it by ear, see what happens.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'm quite excited to see that, and I'm also quite excited to see all the other. There are a lot of YouTube colleagues that are sort of creators are doing a lot of fantastic things. So I think Home Assistant and NodeRed is picking up pace now. It's picking up in popularity. I think that will benefit all of you guys viewing, because you can sort of get different people's opinions. There's no right and wrong, right? There's no, oh yeah, Home Assistant is better than NodeRed or NodeRed is better than Home Assistant. I think it's good. I would sum it up and say it is good to know how to use both. And it's also good to know when to use one or the other. But don't make my mistake in the sense of you don't know where the automation is at the end. So if you use too many different platforms, you then say, where is this automation? And it's okay to then change always. You can always move your automations to one platform to another. So I am not I'm not going to pick a side, but I think thanks to this video, Will, I would like to thank you for actually sharing all of that with me. I'm going to actually do a lot more learning about NodeRed, and I'll try and create some more automations, maybe during the Christmas holidays when I have some time to learn NodeRed a bit more and see how sort of powerful it is, as you sort of demonstrated. In terms of my channel, I've got a couple of videos coming up in terms of one's multi-zone heating using, for example, NestFam Stellantis devices, and using Home Assistant's power to actually work with them together. If you enjoyed this live stream and you would like to see this live stream with maybe Will in the future again, he'll join us again, or other guests, let me know if you like this sort of format, if this was informative. To support the channel, you'll find links below. You'll find all of Will's gear, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are affiliate links, right, Will?
Yeah, just a list of all the kit I've got, so you can kind of see what I'm using in my stuff. I think that's kind of a useful way to, kind of what I use, and then you can work out what you want to use based on that.
Fantastic. So give it a last couple of minutes if there are more questions, and I think we'll call it an evening. So let's go back to the chat. Let's see if we've got some last questions.
Omar has said that some Zigbee devices don't have entities, so using an event allows you to capture the data and then filter as required. Didn't know that. That's very good to know. And then obviously you can pull that into automations as and when you see fit. Very clever.
Very good, very good. Fantastic. Give it a couple more seconds. See if someone else wants to ask a question. It could be even about something else, not necessarily about NodeRed or Home Assistant. Okay, I think we're all good. Well, big thank you, Will, for actually joining and sharing all that knowledge. I really appreciated that. I have had some fun actually meeting you, following you on YouTube first, and actually getting to know you now during the process a bit. It's all good. So, well, if you want to say bye.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure being here. I obviously haven't done a live stream before, so this is quite exciting for me, and might set a precedent for me going forward. So yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I hope this has been useful to everyone. Kind of just going over the differences between the different ways of doing it. Obviously, Home Assistant is so versatile; it can do whatever you want it to do in a number of different ways. You just kind of got to be aware of the different options out there, so you can then pick your own. So yeah,
fantastic. Right, so guys, enjoy the week coming up. Hopefully, it's a good week. And if we don't do it live before Christmas, so have a great Christmas, and stay safe. And I'm gonna end the broadcast right now. Thank you guys for joining. Like, subscribe, the usual stuff. You know that already, so no need to say that. See you guys.
bye.